Good afternoon. Thanks for joining Tech in Asia and Xero to discuss 2021 and beyond, a digital transformation action plan for SMEs. Small and medium enterprises have borne the brunt of the unprecedented economic, business, and social impact of COVID-19. As the economic backbone of Southeast Asia, we want to explore how these companies like yours, can future-proof your business for the economy in 2021 and beyond. In today's discussion, we'll discover how the thriving SME community can make the best out of its road to recovery, and how you can accelerate your digital transformation journey into 2021 and beyond. Before we begin, my name is Andrew Baisley. I'm the Managing Director of Tech in Asia Studios. We are the multimedia production arm of Tech in Asia, helping our editorial team produce visual content, organizing events just like this one, and helping brands connect with Tech in Asia's audience through compelling storytelling. First, a few housekeeping rules. Please feel free to chat with each other and connect with other attendees using the chat function here. We'll be leaving plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions at all, please put them in the questions tab, and you can do that anytime throughout the conversation. You can also vote on other people's questions, so make sure you check that out. Now I'd like to invite our panelists on stage while I introduce them to you all. First, I'd like to invite Namra Deka, Senior Marketing Development Manager of Expansion at Shopify. Namra manages market development at Shopify, and he has more than 10 years of experience in the e-commerce industry. Namra laid the foundation for the Shopify partner ecosystem in South Asia before taking up business development in emerging markets across Asia. Currently, most of his work involves partner-led initiatives focused on merchant growth. He has a lot of empathy for new businesses and loves engaging with aspiring and current entrepreneurs. Next, I'm happy to introduce Ashley Schroeder, co-founder of A2X. And he's A2X's lead software architect. Ashley is an e-commerce accounting expert and has been developing software for the e-commerce industry for over a decade. Ashley works close with world-leading e-commerce accountants and advisors who specialize in Amazon and Shopify businesses. He's passionate about sharing his acquired knowledge so accountants can tap into the large, fast-growing e-commerce sector and help those businesses grow. Hey, Ashley.
Hey, Andrew. Hey.
Finally, please help me welcome Christian Antono, Strategic Partnerships Manager at Xero. Chris was one of the first hires, actually I think he was the first hire for Xero Asia in Singapore 4 years ago, and he's been instrumental in the fast growth of Xero in Asia. Chris looks after Xero's ecosystem and strategic partners across Asia. Prior to this role, Chris looked after Xero's accounting firm partners across Asia, empowering them in their cloud transformation journey. Thank you all for being here. I'm really excited to dive into this topic. I know it's so important to so many of our readers and so many business operators in the region. I just want to start with like a lay of the land and help us really understand your viewpoint on the reality for SMEs right now, because this has been a tough year. Namra, why don't we start with you? I'd love, given the large number of businesses that you touch across the region at Shopify, what concerns do you have, or what kind of keeps you up at night when you're thinking about SMEs?
Thank you for the question, Andrew, and good afternoon, everyone. I think Andrew's set the tone for our conversation really well. But let me start by sharing some more context. So at Shopify, you might know we are obsessed with enabling more and more small businesses to democratize commerce for everyone, to make commerce better for everyone everywhere. And this year has been no different. The e-commerce industry, of course, was moving at a fast-forward pace, though. It was almost like 2030s here in 2020. So selling online has become a necessity, and with all humility, I can assure you that we've been able to help hundreds of thousands of merchants across the globe. But keeping that in mind, there has obviously been a lot of expectations from merchants for us to move quickly, and rightly so. I think that has surely, kept me on my toes. But coming to your question, Andrew, there is a general gap in, awareness or, educating the ecosystem about the potential of online commerce. And there's so much that we could do together in that space. So that's something I constantly think about, ideas as to how we can reach the long tail. And the other piece would be, existing businesses are not spending time in the right sort of functions. For example, if I am into selling cakes, I should not be worried too much about integrating a payment gateway to my store. I should be focused on my core expertise. So I think for SMBs, when they try to get everything under one roof, that becomes sort of a bottleneck for the growth. So in order for us together again to be able to surface the right tools and resources available so that they can focus on their core expertise is something that keeps me up.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, those are good points, Namran. And we will definitely dive into those, how businesses can sort of focus in on what they're actually good at and maybe offload some of the other technology pieces. Ashley, how about you? I think you have a long history in the market. You've been working in e-commerce for maybe about as long as e-commerce has been around. I'm sure you've seen many ups and downs. Can you just put that into context? Like, how does that compare to what you're seeing in the market today?
Yeah, good question, Andrew. Yeah, so we started selling online in 2008, which sounds like a heck of a long time ago now. I guess over a decade, and that certainly wasn't the start of e-commerce. Amazon was already a massive online store, but there wasn't as much smaller e-commerce businesses. It was less developed, and I think there's that kind of famous chart that people show of the percent of retail that is e-commerce. And you can kind of see it just gradually growing every year, right? More and more retailers moving online. And then I think to Namra's point, in the last 12 months with what's been happening internationally, that graph has kind of gone from a steady rise to a really sharp jump. As sort of, every business I think is looking to online to be able to stay open and keep their businesses going. So I think, across that whole time, there's always felt like a tailwind for e-commerce, the sort of rising tide, I guess. Lots of businesses as they go online can be successful. So I think that's always felt good for e-commerce businesses in general. But the flip side is the competition, right? I mean, it's more and more businesses are getting online. 10 years ago, you might have been the only person selling a certain niche type of, pet bed or dog food or something online. But now, there'll be a dozen other companies doing that kind of thing. So I think with that increased adoption of e-commerce has come a lot more competition, and a lot of businesses having to really fight to compete. Margins become really a lot tighter. Big marketplaces like Amazon have become really competitive as well. So I think that's probably the flip side to that kind of tailwind, is that more and more adoption of e-commerce is definitely driving competition in the market.
Are there any parallels that can be drawn between that 2008 experience, which was obviously the height of the financial crisis, compared to today, which is a very different type of crisis, but still its businesses are questioning, what does their future look like? Are there parallels to be drawn there, or is it a totally different thing?
There was definitely a period of time earlier this year where, I think it was around March time, where it felt like there was this collective kind of gasp across the globe, and everybody kind of got worried, I think. And I'm sure you felt it everywhere. There was a sort of feeling of oh my gosh, I'm not sure what's going to happen. And I think that uncertainty and the effect that had on a lot of businesses and companies, I think there was an element of that, 2008, 2009. It was more kind of financial systems uncertainty rather than global pandemic uncertainty. But anytime there's that sort of uncertainty about what's going to happen in the future and a lot of negativity, I think it drives a lot of people to kind of pull back from any investments and projects they might have been planning. And so I think, in that regard, there is definitely a parallel. Sort of unprecedented, this kind of V-shaped recovery, I guess. There's been a sort of an unprecedented rise back again from that kind of situation in March. But so in that regard, there's a lot of similarity, I think, just in the way businesses are reacting and the kind of effect it's had on selling online and e-commerce generally.
Yeah, thanks for that perspective, Ashley. Chris, I want to understand from you if the current situation has changed the thinking or approach to market that any of the partners that you work with are dealing with. And do you think that companies in general, whether they're your partners or your customers, are more ready to embrace change right now than they have been in the past?
Absolutely. I think companies now are more ready to embrace those changes. They are pretty much driven by these unprecedented situations. A simple example is that Xero as a company, as a tech company, we fully embraces our digital tools, and we are pretty comfortable interacting with it, working with it internally, but we often struggle to actually get our clients, our partners even, to agree to meet online like this. It's been unfathomable. Like last year, if you're telling me that we're going to do roadshows, all the events fully online this year. So it's just so embedded, especially in Asia, in the context of Asia, that people are just so used to meeting one another physically, scheduling physical meetings, meeting in the coffee shops and stuff like that. So that has been the main changes. People are more receptive towards other means of connecting, such as this. And we are seeing a lot of our customers and our partners pivoting from their current business in various ways. So just like Namra mentioned earlier, a lot of business going online, a lot of business going online, considering online options to actually bolster their brick and mortar presence. Some businesses even shift to 100% online, ditching away their storefront and deliver everything, all their services, goods and services online. And some partners, I see them diversifying their core service offerings. An example would be a POS now starting to offer also last mile delivery, because everybody's at home. Somehow we still need to get the goods or services delivered to their doorstep. So that's been really refreshing to see this. And I'm hopeful that this is going to be positive in the long run.
Interesting. Okay. Actually, when we talk about digital transformation, we often think about the modernization of back office. Can you talk to us a little bit about what digital transformation means in the context specifically of e-commerce?
Yeah, so at A2X we deal with all sorts of different e-commerce businesses. Ranging from sellers on Amazon marketplaces to sellers on, say, Shopify stores, and we're helping them do their accounting, which, by its nature, because we're integrating with Xero, it's already sort of digitized. And I think inherently a lot of e-commerce businesses lean towards being digital anyway. Obviously, to sell online, they have to be digital, but a lot of the other systems and parts of their business are already, reasonably kind of technology enabled. But it's surprising, even for what I would consider to be pretty modern companies, we often come across businesses with really very manual, somewhat tedious kind of processes, especially when it relates to things like accounting particularly, but also things like inventory management and warehousing, vendor management, purchasing. So I would say over time, I feel like all aspects of a business are going to digitize and be powered by software. I think there's that famous quote by Mark Andreessen about software eating the world. And I think that that any business that's not automating as much as they can with software over time is just less competitive, and it slowly affects things like margins. You're going to end up being undercut by people that have automated and streamlined more of their operations and e-commerce operations particularly. So yeah, I think the opportunity for e-commerce businesses, obviously they're already forward thinking, already automating and digitizing a lot, but I think there's so much room to do more of that. And I think to stay competitive, they'll need to, as more and more businesses move online.
Right. You touched on this, and I think it's natural for a lot of business owners to think, oh, I need to digitize because it's an easier, better way to do things. But you just mentioned that it also makes them more competitive. Is that, in your experience, has that been a real competitive differentiator for businesses that are in the e-commerce vertical?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to what we do, accounting, because I know it really well. But I think, if you compare a business that's still paying a bookkeeper to come into their office one day a week and punch in a bunch of receipts into a desktop machine or something, the turnaround time on the information they're getting is much slower. But also that process in itself is inherently very manual, right? I mean, if the person calls in sick one day, you end up waiting a whole extra week to find your financials. And so the whole thing is, it's not really compatible with digitized businesses. But then I think the other part of it is the amount of detail you can get if you do integrate all of these systems and have them directly talking to each other. You can get so much more fine-grained information. Like I think often when we're onboarding new businesses to A2X and they first see some of these transactions coming through, and it's almost like a light bulb moment, right? They're like, wow, I didn't know I was spending all that money on these fees or these charges. And so I think bringing that data into an accounting system like Xero and tracking it and really focusing in on the things that matter, it lets you have a much better control of your margins, much better control of like cash flow, and all of that has a flow-on effect to margins, revenue, and profitability. So yeah, I do think even in the small area that we focus in accounting, I think the more automation and digitization you can do there can have a really big knock-on effect further down, further through the business.
Great, yeah, that makes sense. Namra, I'm sure you've seen many businesses go through this process, in going through the process of modernizing their commercial operations on platforms like Shopify. Can you just walk us through like what that process looks like for an SME? Like, how do they actually go about that?
Absolutely. I mean, yes, we are lucky enough to kind of, see this on a daily basis, SMEs going through this transformation. I completely second, Ashley's opinion on how digitizing, even accounting for that matter, could help a business in so many forms. So obviously, imagine automating other forms or aspects of the business would exponentially help, any vertical of business. It could be fashions, could be apparel, doesn't matter. It's all the same in through this lens. So I think for us, you'll have to understand Shopify, we support a wide range of merchants, so digitizing could mean different, for various types of businesses could be different. So for instance, a brick and mortar business, for them, having a catalog digitized first up is something, it's the baby step they need to take. But if you compare them to say a print on demand business, who wouldn't hold any inventory, they just come up with some creative designs, pass it on to point A where the supplier sits, and is shipped to point B where the customer sits. So we'll have to keep those things in mind. But at a high level, I think what we've been able to do is obviously along the lines of enabling them through community-led events. But what I can tell you is a few things. Objectively looking at it is getting payment licenses, for instance, or understanding the nuances and cost associated with last mile. These drives, awareness campaigns are along the lines of going digital. So we do that pretty often. The power of content, again, like not many SMBs understand the power of content. So to drive repeat behavior of customers and to understand the persona of their customers, they have never invested time and energy to understand the persona of their buyers ever before. So getting into the mindset of these drills is, I believe, along the lines of going digital. So that's what we try and kind of empower them to do. But yeah, very, very sort of in terms of call to action, what we do is, we have an academy. We call it Shopify Compass. So we surface that to them as often as possible. We also, like I said, host events which are based around their pain points to operate a business. So we host a lot of those events. And then a community approach, which is letting entrepreneurs speak to other entrepreneurs who are going online for the very first time. I mean, entrepreneurship could be lonely. So we have a lot of empathy for that. So we want to connect as many merchants as possible with, peers as well as, other successful ones. And we do that like, like today's event, just kind of share our thoughts and connect, help them connect the dots.
Yeah, and so we're going to get into this actual action plan, which I think is like the most tangible piece of this for the people watching today. But before we do that, do you, like, when you're talking to SMEs that are maybe struggling with that mind shift change, what's the, like, should they attend events like this, go to the academy? Like, how much time should they spend doing that versus like pulling the trigger, diving in, looking at the data and like learning as they go? Where's the tipping point?
That's a great question. It depends on who you are speaking to as well from these, especially the legacy SMBs. So the decision makers could be, from the, the present generations. So typically we would need to go to the right decision maker. But, to your question, the tipping point is usually when they see, profitability, more reach. And I think the biggest, opportunity for us here is, the online, commerce enablers like us is the fact that the buyers are moving online. So, it's not too much of a hard sell, and that is the tipping point. If you have, a wide range of age groups, now transacting online, even if they don't have a credit card, they have a digital wallet. So the payments landscape is, exponentially growing, and it's making progress in terms of the various modes of payments available. So if you look at Southeast Asia, for example, where the credit card penetration except Singapore isn't that high, the digital wallets, it's helping us leapfrog into 10 years ahead maybe, or 15 years ahead. So, so there are more and more buyers in the online space, and nobody wants to miss out on that. So again, to Ashley's point, wherein the competition surely is way more than before right now, there are also more buyers. So everybody has a share of the pie, to be honest. And I think if somebody is sold on that idea, along with the fact that they would be more anti-fragile, like like Andrew, you brought it up, in the early part of our conversation, because God forbid, but then if there are not a pandemic situation, but there's a crisis again, businesses who have an online channel would be relatively more equipped to combat those crisis situations. So if you look at it holistically, there's an opportunity there.
Got it. And so, Namra, we're obviously talking about a lot of the consumer-facing digitization through an e-commerce storefront. Chris, in your experience at Xero, how should a business be thinking about digitizing their business practices on the back end to future-proof themselves? And what role does Xero play in that?
Yeah, so I think really good point brought up by Namra and Ashley just now. As the increasing competition going online, I think it's really important that businesses get all the help they can get in terms of like making their backend process more and more efficient. Some of the things that we are doing now in the pandemic situation, can serve only as having a roadshow like this. I personally, in the post-pandemic world, we will once again return to the massive physical events that we used to be. But I think some of the processes, such as digitizing your backend, digitizing your online services, and bringing your shopfront online, I think that's going to stay. That's going to be still relevant in the post-pandemic world. So take an example of a service-oriented business. I think digitizing their physical documents, working in the clouds, and moving away from physical collaborations as much as they can. I believe there will be a tangible benefits in doing so. And as Xero itself, for example, we try to make the backend, the accounting process as easy as possible. We try to connect the source documents to the accounting system as much as possible. We always advocate the data flow, not the data entry. So if you are transacting with our banking partners, for example, you can easily connect Xero with some of our local banks here in Singapore and across the region. And the idea of that is to connect and minimize the human intervention as much as possible. So that way the data flow from the correct source document directly to your accounting system that business owners actually looked at and possibly make a decision based on that. The invoice and the invoicing and quotation processes, we try to help to digitize that as much as possible rather than doing more manual paper-based approval. You can do it really easily with tools like Xero and many other tools out there. And multiple finance staff can also start to work on their books at the same time. So there is really a good benefits to be gained from moving to the cloud and adopting all of these digital solutions. The idea is that we want to give back as much time as possible to these entrepreneurs so that they can focus and reinvest this time to increase the top line of the revenue, improve the current processes, or even spend time with the family. So that has always been our core mission, to really help SMEs to make their life a little bit easier, stay in the business longer. And as a business, we always want to pledge to our customers as well that we want to continue to expand our partnerships, our integrations in our ecosystem as well, so that we can help to capture as much as the end-to-end process as possible. For example, capturing all the transactions from Shopify passed to A2X directly to Xero. We want to help to make sure that business owners have access to close real-time accounting as possible so that they can make a better decisions going forward.
Yeah, I think we all experience this as consumers too. As you're talking, I was reminded a couple of weeks ago I had like an electrical issue in my home. I needed to call an electrician, and he's on the path to digitization. So I paid him via PayLaw So that was fine. There's no cash involved, but the invoice was handwritten. And I need a copy of the invoice now, but it's been several weeks, so I don't have it. I have no idea where it is. So I was actually just messaging him right before this this event, and I was asking him if he can send me another one. He's going to handwrite another one for me. So imagine, the time and effort and my time and his time that could be spent doing something else if all he had to do was click a button, or even better, as a customer, all I had to do is click a button to get a copy of that. Okay, so I want to just remind the audience, if you have any questions at all, we have a few questions coming in, to please drop them into the questions tab. We'll get to those towards the end of the hour, and then you can also vote on questions that you see there. So if someone asks a question that you also want an answer to, you can do that. I want to get into kind of the meat of the topic here, and that's that action plan. And I want to just get your thoughts on the specific steps. And for our viewers, you don't have to remember or write down every single one of them. I'll kind of recap them towards the end of this conversation. But Chris, let's start with you and go back to you. And I want to talk about specifically cultivating an agile culture, because I think Xero as an organization is fairly well known within software communities as representing the execution of an agile culture pretty well. Can you just explain to us how Xero has leveraged a culture of agile thinking to help fuel your own growth that maybe we can learn from?
Yeah, I'm by no means an expert in agile thinking or execution, but what I can share is what I've observed during my time in Xero that truly reflect this, I feel. So we are always following the law of customers more so than the law of the shareholders. We're obsessed to actually deliver steady value to our customers, make the experience better. However, sometimes we don't always give our customers exactly what they want, because sometimes the customer requests for that we build a faster horses rather than invent a car. So we've always liked to experiment and try to rethink the way that we can do certain things. We don't necessarily try to just bring the processes that people used to do from let's say desktop accounting software and bring it to the cloud. We try to see if there is better ways, smarter ways of doing things. And in this processes, you tend to experiment a lot. And there is this culture of taking intelligent risks within Xero, the culture of risk taking. And more importantly, as we grow bigger, we like to decentralize the power within each team, empowering a smaller autonomous teams to actually work together, invent, experiment, and sometimes you get it right, sometimes you fail as well. But I think it's really crucial to have that culture in place, especially when you scale and you get bigger. Things tend to get a little bit more bureaucratic, and we try to avoid that as much as possible, especially as Xero, as we are trying to tackle different geographies across the world. And in Asia, we are trying to tackle different countries' problem. We could not afford to adopt the same cookie cut strategy and hope for the same results for it to be successful. So by fostering this culture of risk taking, assigning a smaller teams to undertake a different projects and present that experiment back to the team, it gives the team a lot more learning, a lot more exposures. At least at the end of the day, we can confidently say that we've tried this A, B, C. A works, B doesn't quite get there, and C just totally fail. But I think it's really good and we feel like we can get really better from this whole experience. At the end of the day, Xero as a company, we just want to keep trying to find the best way to serve our customers. And the most important things in embarking in this experiments is to always refer back to the data as well. So the same advice for the business. Before you actually go on and execute this experiment, make sure that you have all the tools, the data points that you can refer back to, because that is going to be the most valuable outcome that you can get out of all these experiments.
I'm always careful when I'm talking to SMEs to remind them that when we talk about culture in a company, it's often like associated with a tech company thing, but it's really important, I think, for all businesses, as you mentioned, to have a culture that enables their people to execute on the plans that they're trying to put in place. Otherwise, it's very difficult to to actually transform or drive change without a culture to support that. Ashley, from your perspective, maybe on the more technical side, and your perspective as an engineer, how should SMEs be embracing technology like cloud, for example, to make them more flexible and agile?
Yeah, well, I guess this year has been challenging for a whole lot of reasons, and I think it's probably shown a lot of people the benefit, or some of the benefits of being, more cloud-based and orientating your business more to those kind of remote services. For A2X, we're a distributed company and remote first, so we sort of already felt very cloud native, for the last few years. But I think there's some really key things that probably a lot of people have noticed. I feel like we already sort of operated like this, but I think when you're working remotely and it's sort of cloud-based, you want systems to be asynchronous, like especially in different time zones. You can't always expect to have a direct live conversation with someone, and so you're often needing to have this communication that can happen on your time, and then they can pick it up later. And so we use a range of collaborative tools for things like that that are cloud-based. So Google has their product, used to be called G Suite, now called Workspaces, that we use extensively at A2X. There's obviously tools like chat, but even things as simple as Google Docs for collaborative document editing. You can write some things into a document, add some comments, and then come back the next day, and several other people might have all contributed as well. And so I think that kind of collaboration happening online through these cloud services has just become so important. I think also, not personally because we are already cloud-based, but talking to other engineering leaders and other businesses, I think realizing when you suddenly can't go into an office or a physical location, just how important it is having access to all of these services outside of the office. A lot of businesses' network infrastructure and service setups are all physically based. And so suddenly when they're out of the office, they can't get access to the files they might need or the servers inside of the business that they might need. So having those online services be all cloud-based, it means that it doesn't really matter where you are. If your staff are having to work from home for a period of time, all of the business can keep functioning. It makes it a lot more flexible. You're not having to rush around trying to get into the office in a time when that becomes much more challenging. So I think the cloud gives you that. It gives you that flexibility of where you're working and when as well, in terms of time zones and different work schedules. I think there's an element of security as well, because it's being hosted by these big reputable companies. These services are much more secure than you could ever make your local server in your basement of your office building. I think the other part of it that's probably less of an engineering specific thing, but certainly comes into engineering, is the flexible cost structure around most of these cloud services. If you 10 years ago, if you wanted to set up a server, you'd have to go and literally buy a big physical metal box, and plug it into the wall, and that could be tens of thousands of dollars. And now you can run up a Shopify store in literally 20 minutes, and you haven't had to invest in any of that infrastructure, and you can scale it up and grow it as you need. So you don't have that upfront cost, and you're kind of growing the cost as your usage grows. So I think the cloud gives businesses a lot of flexibility from that technology. Like they're getting the flexible upfront costs. They're getting costs that grow as they grow. And also, if it turns out that they don't need the service anymore, they haven't got a sunk cost. They can literally just cancel, and most of the time cancel month to month. So I think the cloud services and technology has really enabled a lot of businesses to control their costs as well as change the way they're working.
Yeah, I guess having the infrastructure in place, which often means like being in the cloud to quickly handle unprecedented things like what happened this year, you just have to be ready for it. Like no one has the crystal ball. You don't know what's going to come next. So building into your core infrastructure the ability to pivot and be flexible, not just with your own products, but like the way you operate your business day to day, the way you communicate with employees. It sounds like that's really key to surviving moments like these.
Definitely, yeah, agreed.
So on a similar note, as you're moving these things into more scalable architecture and into the cloud, there's a lot of data that comes with that. So I'm curious, given your work at Shopify, how do you counsel SMEs to use data to help with the operation of their companies?
Right. So, I mean, as a product company, we are thinking of our existing million-plus merchants and growing at a rapid pace. So, what we do is we surface data-driven information as much as possible to the merchant admin itself, so that all merchants are data informed. So we call it the merchant dashboard, and also enable all the plugins or our rich suite of app ecosystem that we have available on our app store, and it includes many apps that enable analytics, for instance. So that is a very high level sort of tactic that we deploy, which surely helps all our merchants because they log into the Shopify dashboard every day to check for orders, to check for inventory, and whatnot. But going deeper into the funnel, what we also do is we have very strong partner ecosystem. So keeping the scalability in mind, and because we'll not be able to counsel merchants one by one in-house, we have a very strong network of partners, and it comprises of freelancers, agencies in the web development, web design, digital marketing space, who guide these merchants, and they're across the globe. We have a very strong partner ecosystem in Southeast Asia as well. And these are the one-on-one sessions that merchants typically get into, and get some guidance. Could be an early stage merchant, could be a merchant who just seen like a few hundred sales, or could be merchants who are like in the Shopify Plus category, whose GMV would be more than $1 million maybe a year or even a month. And for the enterprise segment, we have a different model. So that is that's almost like a white glove service. So we have our internal success managers and solutions engineers who would guide merchants and keep them data informed. And again, going back to sort of a high-level tactic that we deploy is share industry insights by vertical at times at community-led events. So imagine us partnering up with government agencies that enable SMEs. And then we share as much insights as possible there, so that merchants or sellers can capitalize on those opportunities. That's how we're going about it right now.
So I guess, do you guys see yourselves as like an important partner to your customers to enable them to do things like make better product decisions, make better forecasting decisions? Like I guess beyond, there's like the I think when someone thinks of like Shopify, they're like, oh, I'll have a storefront. But then there's like all this other stuff that you bring as a partner. And I'm like, is that something you talk to your customers about often, or how does that play into their decision to digitize?
Yeah, I think we are very transparent about the fact that having an online store will not get you sales. You'll have to do so many other things to get to those sales. So yes, on that note, we do kind of surface. So look at the products that we have. For example, Shopify Shipping. It helps you with forecasting. You would know how to manage inventory better because we would know the sales trends and so forth. So many of our products forecast inherently. So it's native to the platform, which is great. But for any other sort of data based decisions that merchants need to take day in, day out, I think our partners truly play a massive role, and we do surface our partners at the right places of the merchant journey. Could be in the merchant admin, could be in the form of other comms that we have with our base of merchants, and it varies by country, it varies by merchant segment, because their needs would be very different. But then yes, our partners, like I mentioned up front, are the ones who would have this high engagement, high touch relationship with our merchants, so that they are successful.
Got it. Okay, so Chris, help me tie this together. So we talked about like agile cultures within a company. We talked about bringing your technology stack into more scalable architectures like the cloud. We talked about the data that you can use to make better informed decisions about your business and about the core business that you're running. Are there things that business owners should be thinking about in terms of streamlining or automating sort of their financial processes, organizational processes that can help a business owner like focus on all these other pieces that might matter more to their bottom line?
Yeah, I think the key is really planning. My advice is actually to start small with the easier piece. And what I mean by easy is that by digitizing all of your paper records, to make sure that all of your paper records are all scanned. And we have a lot of tools that can help business do that. That is within the Xero product suite as well. Because the more these source documents are digitized and online, the easier it is for the business owners to find it, to sort it, and at the end of the day, we'll be able to judge how these expenses or how this revenue actually impact the business in the long run. And yeah, again, try to connect as many source documents as possible to your financial processes. So if you can have a bank account, bank statement that can flow directly to your accounting software, do connect them. If you have a POS that can connect to your backend system, do connect them. The key is really to minimize the human interventions in all of these fragmented data points. The idea is to try to make sure that the data flows as smoothly from the source transactions all the way to the P&L without too many human interventions. So the faster the business can capture the sales, fulfill the order, and record all of these transactions, the better it is for the business owners, the better it is for the staff. It can also fuel the whole ecosystem that is around it. Take an example, if you're a growing business that is looking to scale and go to the next level, usually the concern relating the growth is around the funding. Can the business actually have enough fund to fund the working capital? With almost real-time accounting, if let's say you're using this cloud-connected platform, you will almost certainly have the most up-to-date data, at least the day before, or it's synced every day. You can easily take this data to, let's say, to your banking partners or to your lenders around the region, and hopefully get that request processed sooner. So we've seen this in Australia as well, where businesses are really embracing the online real-time accounting, and they can get the funding really within 3 business days when they submit the applications, because the lenders can actually see and confidently say that, hey, the record is solid, I can disperse the money to you. And in that sense, it actually helps the business stay in production longer. And at the end of the day, we want to help all of these small businesses survive and thrive in this environment.
Got it. There's so many nuggets of gold in here. So I'm going to recap the action plan. So I think for our viewers, I think it's the most important thing for us at Tech in Asia is to make sure that we're leaving all of you as something that's really actionable and meaningful to your business. So I'm gonna talk about 4 points that I pulled out of this conversation, and you guys are the experts, so correct me if I've missed anything. But number 1 is to develop and cultivate agile thinking and an internal methodology at your business that really encourages that agile behavior. That starts with the culture of a business. That's the first point. Number 2 is to ensure that your technology stack is architected in a way that increases flexibility as you grow and as market conditions may require you to do so. We've all learned that things pivot really quickly, and your tech stack has to support that. Number 3 is to look at the data that your business is generating. And maybe through this process of digitizing, this is the first time you've ever actually seen this data, but you can find tools and partners to leverage that data for better decision-making, forecasting, business modeling. This will inform you as a business owner on the pivots that you need to undertake, which you'll be able to do because you have an agile culture and the right flexible technology architecture in place. Finally, the last and 4th step of this action plan is to make sure that you're using the available tools and software to really streamline your organizational and financial processes, everything from accounting to compliance to staff and performance management, because this allows you as a business owner to focus on what you actually care about, which is your products and your customers. Did I miss anything there? Does that pretty much cover it's 4 steps. It's super easy to do. Everyone can do it right now.
That was a great summary.
Okay.
Yeah, Andrew, that's a great summary. Just a quick thing. I would highly encourage SMBs not to kind of spend too much time in the decision-making process, whether to go online or not, because it's almost like an experiment. The entry barrier is so low that anybody could give it a shot and then see where it goes for 3-6 months maybe, and then decide it for themselves. So yeah, just please ensure that the decision-making process is shorter.
Yeah, and just to echo Namra's point as well, a lot of like SaaS business modeling nowadays, they offer a lot of free trials. Usually we don't have any lock-in periods. We really try to make it easy for businesses to try and give you choices essentially. So when you look for like a platform like Xero, like Shopify, it's good that you actually invest in a platform that has multiple choices. So in case one thing doesn't work, you are not actually tied to that one particular solution. You can actually try other things, and especially as you scale as well, that's going to be more and more relevant.
Cool. We actually have a ton of great questions. I want to quickly so I want to leave plenty of time for those. Before we do that, we've talked a lot about like the challenges this year, what your advice is for businesses that are in the midst of those challenges right now. I just want to take a moment to like look forward, because I'm pretty optimistic about the future. I think you guys are as well. Namra, why don't we start with you? For businesses that take the time and the effort to implement this action plan or something similar, what do you think they have to look forward to in 2021 and beyond?
Okay, great. So I'll keep this again super objective. One is you'll be where the customers are, which is awesome. This will be an additional revenue stream for your business, which is great, of course. And I think you'll get to adopt to this sort of omni-channel approach in the online space, not just direct to consumer or a brand.com. So the omni-channel experience, which is social commerce, conversational commerce, marketplaces, brand.com, all of that put together. You can actually go behind a brand building effort there. So building a brand is a whole new thing altogether, and I'm sure it'll be an enjoyable journey for all of you business owners out there. I think once you get to online, you'll be able to reduce costs. I think Ashley mentioned that upfront, even Chris. The operating costs, capital costs. There are multiple areas where you'll learn that you could operate in better margins. So that's again going to add to your top line. I think if you haven't engaged with your sellers or your audience, in the past, the online channels will open up that opportunity. Just engaging with your customers more closely to gather feedback, to understand how they perceive your brand. All of those things, will make your journey so much more worthwhile.
Well, I'm excited too. Ashley, what about you? What verticals, business segments, what are you really excited about in the coming years?
Well, I talk to different e-commerce businesses often for the product side of the business, and I'm always amazed. There's a lot of, I think, Namra, you mentioned these businesses building brands. There are so many incredibly niche direct-to-consumer businesses popping up. They get a product, they design it, they get it manufactured, and it's extremely niche. They've got this like laser focus of the exact target customer that they're going after. And I've been, really impressed every time I talk to these businesses about their growth plans and the rate that they're growing, and often with really, really, small teams. It can be 2 or 3 people behind these companies. I think that's a really interesting area, and what's going on there at the moment, like the level of nicheness and in the different ways that reaching customers through social media or interesting distribution techniques, I think are really interesting. And then, looking to some of the bigger companies that are kind of taking this even further. If you look at like what Peloton's doing with exercise bikes, combining that DTC kind of direct to consumer exercise equipment with an online experience, and Apple recently did that with a watch and this Apple Fitness video experience. So I think fusing those digital experiences to the direct-to-consumer product kind of e-commerce brand as well is going to be a really interesting area over the next 12 to 24 months.
Yeah, cool, Ashley. Thanks for that insight. And then, Chris, for SMEs that are listening today, I just want to get your input on what advice you would give to them to pick like the right apps to undergo this digital transformation, moving into this optimistic future that we're painting and that I believe. And then are there any plans that Xero has to further boost the SMEs community's digital transformation journey?
Yeah, so if you are looking your digital, if you're starting your digital transformation journey today, like Namra mentioned before, try to shorten your decision making when you're trying out all of these different apps. The reason why I say that is because it's really very seldom that you can get all of your apps right when you plan it out from the start. because things might change. Sometimes you may not actually like the particular apps, and you have to change. And especially as you continue to grow and scale, your needs may evolve, and that particular apps may not be suitable for you anymore. So again, re-emphasizing my point, it's really when you look at your baseline apps, the most important apps like your shop front, your accounting platform, try to select the platform that offers you the most flexibilities in terms of the ecosystem around it, because that will allow you to really to tailor-make your businesses to your liking. And do not be afraid to actually engage a consultant if you feel like you need help, if you don't feel too comfortable in doing it yourself. Even though a lot of these things are pretty easy if you take the time to do so, but if you're in a rush, don't be shy to actually engage consultant, because once you engage in the experts, they will actually save you a lot of time, and you will feel the benefits a lot sooner than when you when you do it yourself. And yeah, start simple. Like I said, start with those apps that digitize your receipts, your records. You will be blown away by how much time you actually save by not having to go through your physical file, but having all of those records for you online, ready for you to access anytime.
Yeah, awesome, Chris. Okay, we've got some great questions from our viewers, so I am going to jump over to those. Okay, let's start with Jonathan Chu, who asks, and I think Namra, this is probably for you. Would you say that where digital transformation for SMEs is concerned, the biggest obstacle is education, educating them on what's a good persona, how do you use it, the effects on marketing, sales, product management? Would you agree with that? Like, is education the biggest obstacle?
Absolutely. I mean, which is why I kind of highlighted that up front. That's one thing that keeps me up at night. Just educating the ecosystem, making them aware of the possibilities. But even if you look at the existing base of our merchants and merchants selling online, there is a lot of gap there as well in terms of what they could do further to exploit the online commerce space. So I think that is what we need to kind of we need to bridge that gap together. And it could be a combination of things. It could be product management. It could be, but more than product management, I would say, here product management would be the product that they sell actually. So yes, if you mean that, then product management, of course. Customer relationship management, maybe running loyalty programs to ensure repeat behavior happens. So there are so many moving parts to it that we could educate. How do you run digital marketing campaigns? Be it Google, be it Facebook. Now we are integrated to TikTok. So how do you leverage TikTok as a channel? Like there are a ton of sales channels for our merchants in the US. Walmart is integrated to Shopify. Pinterest is integrated to Shopify. Etsy is integrated to Shopify. So these are niche sort of sales channels, each of which requires merchants to kind of obviously ramp themselves or upskill themselves. So it'll always be an ongoing effort because it's an ever-evolving landscape out there, and we are trying to move as fast as possible to ensure that all the options are available for merchants in the ecosystem. But education will always remain a top priority. It could be we own it as much as possible. We delegate it to our partners as much as possible as well, because it has to be an ecosystem effort, or a community effort, not just Shopify kind of running alone here. So yeah, but overall education is something we'll all have to work together on.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, we have a question here. I think this is pretty interesting. Maybe Ashley, you have a viewpoint on this with the clients that you work with. This is from Deepa Damswari, hopefully I pronounced that right. How do you ask people to follow the manual steps in digitizing a process when people still try to pass the steps because they want to simplify things as much as possible? How do you guide people, maybe employees who aren't familiar with automation that comes with this new technology? I think this is a common problem in a lot of SMEs.
Yeah, so I think they're asking in terms of how do you get, say, staff or customers to follow the steps involved in automating, they're not referring to the manual steps within an automatic process, I think.
I think that's the crux of the question, is like, how do you get your staff to follow these new things? Maybe they're not used to that.
Yeah, it's really challenging. We see it a lot, especially when you've got a business that's adopted a lot of new technology, and old habits die hard. I think for a lot of teams within a company, they're used to doing things the way they've done it for the last 5 years, and when all those things change, I don't think there's a silver bullet for that. I don't think there's an easy way. The new process ideally is going to be better, right? Like it should have some pull factor, and I think anytime it doesn't would definitely be making me wonder, is there a problem there? Like it should be so much better, hopefully, that employees are thinking it's worth doing. But we see it a lot in different kind of operational techniques that e-commerce businesses might be using. Like maybe they take orders and then they just sort of randomly put different products in the box if they're out of stock, and send an email to the customer to say, oh, by the way, we gave you a red one instead of a blue one, as an example. And then they sort of will be like, why is our stock stock levels wrong? It's like, well, because you didn't keep track of what you actually shipped in the box. So there's this sort of these old processes that maybe worked when it was paper-based that don't work when it's automated. And so there is an element of following the processes. But I think if the processes are really automating and making people's lives easier, they'll be drawn to them. And hopefully that's going to be the ultimate thing that's going to bring people into line with the processes and digitization.
Yeah, that makes sense. If you set things up thoughtfully, then hopefully it actually makes their lives better. And it also points back to just the putting the work in up front, to have a culture that is embracing change.
Definitely.
Chris, were you going to say something?
Yeah, essentially it is change management, right? It's trying to involve as many stakeholders in your companies as possible, because we face that problem all the times as well, especially in the early days when we are trying to educate people on the benefit of the cloud itself. We are not even going to the cloud accounting, but going to the cloud in general. So I think from the experience, like Ashley mentioned, there's no silver bullet. But what we found the most helpful is to try to involve as many stakeholders, not just the business owners, because usually the business owners are bought into their visions. But if you can actually reason your way down to the execution, to the people who are executing it, I think you'll have much better results and less resistance. But yeah, it's try to involve them in as many ways as you could throughout the process.
There's a question here from Ismail Saeed, who asks kind of a related question. Are there, and this is open to anyone who has a viewpoint, but are there industries that are still resistant to digital transformation? And if so, what are their key decision-making challenges? Like, are there any industries that pop out in any of your heads as like, oh, these guys are really resisting the change? Or is this like a universal, this is happening in every vertical?
I can maybe highlight a few examples. One would be so if the price points are really, really high, or if it is very difficult to ship. So imagine a car, not the easiest to ship, also a high ticket item, or jewelry, pure metal jewelry. So I think there are concerns because of obvious reasons in these verticals. They might be like, is the shipping safe? Do I have to insure my products before I ship it and stuff like that? But otherwise, I cannot think of any, because we've seen it all in 2020. It's like there are products from every vertical you can imagine selling online. So I think those are the two constraints or bottlenecks I can think of, but otherwise not.
Yeah, one that I've seen, and we've seen at Tech in Asia in our reporting, is there's sometimes cultural barriers to businesses adopting new technology, and these are typically not actually related to the technology, but more the business model. So, for example, in Indonesia, a lot of SMEs are hesitant to pay a software product a monthly fee, for example, for accounting, even if they're spending hours on, in a leisure, but they will do things like they will digitize their payroll if it's a quote unquote free product, but then there's some revenue share on the payroll, or there's an insurance product tied to it, and that's how the company's making their money. Whereas in other markets, they might be perfectly okay with businesses paying just a monthly subscription fee. Have you guys seen anything similar to that? I mean, I think you all operate platforms that require sort of a monthly buy-in.
Recurring revenue or SaaS, yes, that's something you will always have to kind of elaborate on, and the value proposition there for for the buyer. In this case, in our cases, our merchants. So yes, the value of SaaS, the value of do it yourself, and what's the blend between do it yourself and do it for me, and so yeah, that's a very valid point. And markets like Indonesia, I think it's even more prevalent. In terms of not adopting the SaaS as easily, rather a capital upfront investment and just one time. So yeah, that's a great thought.
We do occasionally come across businesses that when you talk to them about how they're currently doing their accounting and they maybe are doing it manually. And you talk through what we can do for them, especially if we're connecting to say Shopify or Xero as well. And you sort of lay it all out and you think you've made a pretty compelling case on why it's worth doing. And they'll say, oh no, I think we'll just keep doing it manually. It's a little bit more expensive doing it with software or something. And I often think but now you're gonna have to actually hire and manage staff to organize all of this. It feels like they don't often factor in the total cost of a solution.
Yeah.
So I think even within industries where we probably work with a lot of digital companies already, but I think even there can still be some internal resistance to certain types of software. Definitely.
Yeah, makes sense. We're actually up against time. We're a little over time. There's one last. There's actually a couple of questions that we didn't get to, and I apologize for that. I want to just take kind of moderator's privilege. We'll go over time by a couple minutes here, and end with this question, which is with Jonathan Chu again. What metrics do you use in your organizations to determine a successful quote unquote digital transformation implementation among the companies and clients that you work for? Is there a point when you look at your customers, you say okay, they have transformed. They've successfully implemented this action plan.
I can talk about the kind of metrics we look for. So when we're bringing new customers into A2X, the big thing for us is when there's a little bit of setup obviously involved. They need to connect the various channels. They need to set up the accounting kind of configurations and tax configurations. So there's some work involved in doing that. But for us, that kind of aha moment is when they've actually got their settlements or their payouts into their accounting system. They've reconciled it against the cash and kind of seen how easy that whole process is. And so we consider that kind of a posted settlement once it's gone right through to there. And so we look at, a business that's posting all of their settlements. We know that they've kind of reached that moment. They've seen how it all works. They've understood and getting the value. And so for us, that's a key measurement. A key metric is what percentage of these settlements are getting posted through to Xero, say.
Yep. Oh, Chris, I think you're muted actually.
Yeah, so for Xero side, we actually have a couple of milestones as well involved around the education process. So when people get onboarded to us, usually they'll be served up with education content, like self-study content that we'll have to go through. So we kind of look at that as an indication whether the staffs who are implementing that have that prerequisite knowledge to undertake the process. And sometimes for even bigger clients as well, we have our consulting team to actually engage with them and give them a little bit of advice, give them a couple of milestones to go through. I think these milestones will vary from business to business. So from our side, for example, it is when we see that, hey, 50% of the transactions have been properly accounted for, people are actually using and engaging, logging into the system on a regular basis rather than reverting to their old ways. And at the end of the day, because we are SaaS companies as well, and we are for-profit companies as well, we actually kind of look at the churns as well, because I think sales is a strong indicator whether or not we've actually done the proper implementation. Because for SaaS company, it is in our interest to actually make sure that our customers use it on an ongoing basis, because the moment the customer stops using it, that's the moment where we don't get any revenue at all. So that's going to be one of the strong indicator, but we have other smaller milestones along the way. And I think it's really important for your company to define what that milestone is internally.
Yep, Chris, those are great points. Okay, we are definitely over time, so I'm going to wrap it up here. Thank you so much, Namra, Ashley, Chris, really for generously sharing your time with us. This has been really insightful for me, and I hope for everyone watching. Before you go, if you enjoyed this event, I hope you'll consider subscribing to Tech in Asia Live. Tech in Asia Live is a new subscription option from Tech in Asia that gives you access to live sessions, workshops, conferences, including all 70 recorded sessions at the recent Tech in Asia Conference 2020. We have a limited time offer for people that are viewing here today at $59 per year to access all of that live content. The original price is $99 a year. So there's a link, I believe, that should be posted in the chat if you're interested in that. Either way, thank you so much to everyone for giving us your time today. I hope it was helpful. Thank you to Xero, and I hope that 2021 and beyond is the optimistic vision that I think we all share.